Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. Today I am here to talk to you about my favourite horror books. Yeah, that's it really. I'm just gonna go through some of my favourite horror books, tell you the plot of them, explain why I like them so much. And yeah, I meant to get this out in October, but my YouTube channel got started a little bit later than I wanted, but hey, November's still a cold, dark, dreary time of the year, and it's still an excellent time to read some good horror novels. So, without further ado, the first one I'm going to talk about is Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. This is such a good book. I read it this year around April time, and I just instantly fell in love with it. Joe Hill is actually the son of Stephen King, which I didn't realise. Obviously, I'm a massive Stephen King fan. But I think his son is actually scarier than Stephen King has ever been. So Heart-Shaped Box is about this guy who is a rock star, and he used to be really famous, and he's kind of a little bit washed up now. But he collects spooky themed paraphernalia as his hobby, and one day he's browsing a site like eBay and he finds a ghost for sale and he decides to buy it. And I don't really want to say much more than that because from chapter 5 onwards there are spoilers, but honestly it's so good. It's the ghost obviously turns out to be real, I will say that much, and it's just a really dark exploration of how things from your past can haunt you, and it's just got some really creepy elements. So the ghost uses hypnosis, and that in itself is really terrifying. It's something that has definitely been done before, but I haven't read about it before, and I've only kind of seen it in rubbishy horror films. But there's something really scary about this ghost that can control people, and yeah, it's really good. It's really scary. I should say I don't normally get scared by books, but pretty much every book on this list, almost every book on this list did in fact scare me, which is quite a rare thing. I read a fair bit of horror. I just don't know what it is about books, but they don't scare me in the same way that movies do. But Heart-Shaped Box definitely did. It definitely got inside my head. And it's really good. There's also not much sexual content in it, which is fantastic. My main gripe with horror is that it gets mixed up with gross, very explicit sexual parts, and I really don't like it when authors do that. And that doesn't happen with Heart-Shaped Box. It also doesn't happen with almost every book on this list, apart from the next one I'm going to talk about, which is Gerald's Game by Stephen King. This is the only Stephen King book that has genuinely scared me. It's about a woman who is having sex with her husband, and they introduce handcuffs into the bedroom, and he handcuffs her up. She decides she doesn't like it. He goes to sexually assault her and she kicks him, and then he dies of a heart attack. None of this is spoilers, this is all bang smack in the first chapter. And then she's stuck handcuffed to this bed. They'd gone on a retreat, so they're in like a remote cabin somewhere in the woods, and she's completely alone. And the entire book is about her being handcuffed to this bed and the way her mind plays tricks on her and her trying to escape, and it's so good. It's a different kind of horror. It's really intense. There's actually several points in this book where I had to stop reading because it was so intense. There's very graphic scenes, not in terms of sexual content, just in terms of brutal, I guess, disfigurement of bodies or whatever you want to call it. And then there is also, I will say, strong themes of incest in this book, which isn't really a spoiler, but I feel it's something that people need to know about, because if you're not expecting it and you don't like reading about, well, no one likes reading about it, but you can't read about that kind of thing, it will catch you off guard, and it is pretty intense, as per usual with Stephen King. Yeah, so that's Gerald's Game. I haven't seen the Netflix movie of it yet. I haven't heard good things, but I will be watching that at some point, and I might do a separate video talking about how good or bad it is, depending on what I think of it. So the next book is Frozen Charlotte by Alex Bell. This is a young adult horror book, but make no mistake, it is absolutely terrifying. It is about a group of cousins, and they're all various ages. I think the youngest one's 8 maybe, and then they go up to like 15 or 16 or something. I haven't read this book for about a year now. But they go to stay with a relative in this old house, and this house used to be a boarding school and it's not anymore. And the cousin who lives in that house has a room that is full of China dolls, and I don't remember much about the plot. I just remember that the dolls, or their dolls, are coming to life, and it's really, really creepy. I have a slight fear of dolls anyway, as most people do if they're not completely insane. But yeah, it was really intense. It was really scary. I remember this book, I heard about it because Zoella of all people recommended it, and I remember being shocked that she recommended it because she's got a lot of young viewers, and this book terrified me when I read it, and I was like 19, 20 at the time, so God knows what it did to any of her teenage viewers. But yeah, it's a really good read. It's very creepy, intense. It's excellent for reading in these colder months, so November, December, January. I definitely recommend reading it then if you can. Yeah, it was a really good story. And the next book I'm going to talk about didn't actually scare me at all, but I love it all the same, and it is Slasher Girls and Monster Boys. It's an anthology of short stories by various authors, and it is possibly my favourite anthology that I've ever read. I gave it 5 stars instantly, and each story is a different kind of horror story. They've all got various different tones. It's an eclectic mix, and I pretty much load every single story, which basically never happens with anthologies. I'll link my blog review down below if you want more details about each of the individual stories, because I talk about them on that, and like I mentioned, my favourites and the ones I wasn't so keen on. But it's just a really good mix of really interesting horror stories. I love horror anthologies in particular, but again, most of the ones I read tend to have weird, bad stories in them, like extremely sexual stories, or else they're all cosmic horror, which I'm not a fan of. Whereas this is a good solid mix of all the same, or different tones, but all the same kind of monster-based horror where there's ghosts, and it's young adult as well, so there's not anything explicitly sexual in the weird way that horror does. I feel I should add, I don't mind reading about sex at all in books, but the way horror does it in particular I do not like, because I don't like the kind of glorification of sexual violence, and I don't like the whole blending of violence and sex in a way that's meant to be horrific but also kind of sexy. I don't want to ever read about anything like that. Yeah, so that's that anthology, and the final book I'm going to talk about is another anthology, but these are all by the same author, and this is Small Horrors by Darcy Coates. I love this anthology. I've read it twice now. It's got 50 stories in it, and they're all really short. They're about 3 to 4 pages, if not less, and they're just little tiny wondrous snippets of a horror setting, and each one ends in like a twist. But they're all fantastically written. They're all really interesting, even if they're not scary. A lot of them have stayed with me, which is impressive because I first read it like 2 years ago, and I think I reread it last year, and I still remember a fair chunk of the stories. And yeah, it's just really good. It's different tone again because it's all short, very short stories, and it's all based off twists. But it's really enjoyable, and I think it's about, you can get it from Amazon, super cheap in Kindle format. Yeah, So that is all the horror books at the moment that I want to recommend. They're all my favourite ones for various reasons. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me a thumbs up if you did, it helps me out massively. And I will see you next time.